Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Automating for Digital Transformation, Tools-Driven DevOps and Continuous Software Delivery. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Julie Craig, Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates. Julie has over 20 years of experience in software engineering, IT infrastructure engineering, and enterprise management. At EMA, Julie's focus areas include application management, public and hybrid cloud, and DevOps continuous delivery. And before I hand things off to Julie, I did want today's audience to know that we should have a few moments at the conclusion of today's event to answer your questions. Please feel free to log those at any time using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA tomorrow that will include the on-demand playback as well as some additional resources. So be on the lookout for that. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Julie Craig. Julie?
Thank you so much, Raleigh, and welcome everyone. Before I start my presentation, today's presentation, I wanted to give a special thanks to the sponsors of this research who worked with me both in developing the survey, helped EMA in terms of funding for the survey, and were kind of our partners throughout this process. So thanks very much to Atomic, CloudBees, BMC, and IBM for all your help with this study. So I've been researching DevOps and continuous delivery for several years now, and I'd like to take some time today to discuss our latest survey on these two topics, which is just now in the process of being completed. Actually, the survey is in, and I'm still working on the report, so that should be published within the next, hopefully week and a half. Now, typically my research webinars consist of a summarized list of maybe 10 or 12 top findings. Since every one of these surveys yields so much data, it's difficult to cover it in such a short period of time. However, there were so many interesting tidbits buried in this latest study that I thought that instead of this high-level summary, I'd give you a more detailed look and cover more of the findings at this event. So stay tuned for a barrage of information which will hopefully be as interesting to you as it was to me. Now, that being said, Raleigh will ask you for feedback at the end of this presentation. So, any ideas you have on whether this was too much, too little, please, we'd be more than happy to get that information from you, any input you may have. So background on this report, some of you may remember that we did a similar study on DevOps and continuous delivery back in 2014. It revealed some very interesting insights on these topics and in terms of how they're being implemented in enterprise IT and the outcomes that companies are seeing. With this year's survey, we set out to determine whether last year's findings would be confirmed and reinforced by a follow-up study with a new group of respondents. And so at a high level, we found the results very interesting. We did see continuing growth of digital transformation initiatives, continuing establishment of cross-functional teams as a staple of IT support, additional companies actually engaged in continuous delivery, and another confirmation of the links between these two types of initiatives and revenue growth. So at a high level, that's what we learned. Now let's talk a little bit more about the methodology and some of the detailed findings. So we actually conducted the survey behind these findings in October of 2015. It was conducted by our survey team, so an independent group within EMA that does all the mechanics connected with fielding survey, finding respondents, that sort of thing. With all the respondents now counted, more than 400 IT professionals in total completed the survey. In terms of roles, respondents were approximately one-third high-level executives, one-third middle management, and one-third line staff, almost a direct mirror of the divide in the 2014 survey. So very similar instead of constituents. In terms of company size, respondents tended to be from mid-size or enterprise-sized companies, with the actual percentages of small, medium, and large-sized companies and the way we actually define these companies shown on this slide. So let's start off, since part of the title of this event, it relates to digital transformation. Let's start off by talking about digital transformation. We all know that it's this year's buzzword, but how real is it? You know, is it just something that people are talking about or something they're really doing? As you can see here, digital transformation has truly become a key organizational initiative. 85% of all the companies surveyed report that they are actively engaged in these types of activities. However, the level of interest in digital transformation varies somewhat based on company size. It appears to be most important to enterprise-sized companies, 92% of whom answered yes to this question. However, the majority of both mid-size and small companies as well are also engaged in digital transformation. It's just that the percentages aren't quite as high. So what are the top focus areas? Well, when we asked survey respondents what their top focus areas were, they responded, as you can see on this slide, accelerating delivery timeframes and improving service quality are tied for first place. So they're trying to deliver new software features faster, and they also want those features delivered at high levels of quality. It's also interesting to see, however, that all of these percentages are within a maximum of 7 points of one another. So all of the above is the answer that probably best sums up this question. By the way, on this slide and many of the slides following, you're going to notice that the percentages don't add up to 100%. This is because respondents were asked to select the top 3 in their companies. In talking with IT organizations, I typically find there's no single answer to questions like this one, since most companies focus in on 2 or 3 key areas. So by wording questions in this way, we can get more information about the relative importance of the various initiatives going on in most of the companies that we're talking to today. So in terms of technology and how it relates to digital transformation, continuous delivery-related automation is viewed as the top enabler for digital transformation, and by a considerable margin. From our perspective, one thing this predicts is it will likely to be one of the winners in terms of tools investments for 2016. It's also interesting that this reinforces last year's research, which found that one of the key wish list items was tools that could help people automate the continuous delivery pipeline. So it appears that this is still the case, and that the value proposition of accelerating software delivery is fundamental to digital transformation for the companies that we contacted as part of this survey. So every initiative has its challenges, and this slide reveals the most common ones that our survey respondents perceived as impeding their own digital transformation efforts. As you can see, overcoming organizational silos is the top challenge, and again, this is by quite a significant margin. This reinforces customer interviews that I've done as part of this study as well. Companies which have automated the continuous delivery pipeline tell us that putting in place the process-related and organizational changes necessary to support digital transformation was at least as challenging to them as implementing the automation-related challenges. So a lot of internal things have to be changed as well to enable companies to truly achieve these sorts of major changes within their companies. So in terms of the silo-related challenges that we talked about on the last slide, how are these impacting DevOps and cross-functional types of organizational efforts? Well, first of all, EMA defines DevOps quite broadly as cross-functional teams put in place to support application delivery. The purpose is to promote collaboration across DevOps and even line of business across each appropriate life cycle stage. And of course, the different roles are more important at different stages. Of course, development would be the lead role, for example, in terms of the coding and development stage. As you can see here, by this definition, the vast majority of companies now have these sorts of cross-functional teams in place. This is a dedicated team in approximately 60% of companies and an ad hoc team in the other 40%. Not surprisingly, the ad hoc numbers were higher for smaller companies since many of the IT professionals in those companies wear multiple hats. In almost 50% of these companies, these teams are known either as application support or as infrastructure services teams. However, in a significant change from last year and a big surprise to me, more than 25% of companies now actually use the term DevOps to describe these groups. Last year, only 2% of companies were using this terminology. So it's clear that DevOps concepts are starting to permeate the industry and have almost really become a best practice within today's companies. These teams are most commonly funded cross-functionally as well, which would mean primarily by multiple departments within IT. But in another interesting surprise, and this I didn't really see at all last year, is that in more than 15% of companies, line of business is actually funding these cross-functional teams. Drilling down into this number, when line of business does fund such teams, DevOps is it's almost always in enterprise-sized companies, and so it's clear to me that the enterprise size and even mid-sized companies are viewing DevOps as being competitively important, and if IT is not taking steps to implement such teams, line of business is. Again, there is somewhat of a difference with smaller companies where funding is still more siloed. So, they're sort of still catching up with that cross-functional activity, which probably is somewhat more necessary as silos are more impactful as the company gets larger. In terms of tools planning, companies appear to be focusing far more on cross-functional strategies since DevOps initiatives have become more widespread. Almost 40% of the respondents to this survey indicate an increase in cross-functional tools planning as a result of DevOps initiatives, while another 30% state that tools supporting cross-functional root cause analysis are important as well. So that's kind of a new topic. I've been talking about continuous delivery, but we're seeing increasingly kind of a link between DevOps, continuous delivery, and impact on production that maybe best addressed with application-focused tool sets. So I'll be talking more about that in a couple of minutes. Now, when we look at which areas are causing the most heartburn in terms of DevOps, we see that as this slide shows, this is another one where there is not a huge spread between the percentages across the different types of issues. That being said, packaged applications appear at the top of the list, and they appeared to present a major challenge, which was another surprise for me. Now, this was also mentioned at an industry event I attended last week where we were discussing DevOps and Continuous Delivery. So apparently support for packaged applications, and when we talk about this, it's typically modified packaged applications. So companies, ever since I can remember, have basically written code that sits on top of maybe an ERP system or a CRM system to kind of modify the code to perform more in tune with a company's own initiatives and processes. So I think that's primarily what we're talking about here. So support for packaged applications is a major issue, and there also are no significant differences to this question based on either company size or role. So this appears to be an issue across the board. So drilling down into not just what types of applications are challenging them, but into the nature of these challenges, application complexity is at the top of the list. This really isn't surprising based on the fact that we're seeing so many complex new applications being built. We're also seeing existing applications being componentized and deployed as part of distributed, hybrid, or mobile transactions. Cross-silo collaboration coming in at number 2 complicates the issue. Complex applications often require a considerable amount of synchronization across terms and work streams to be completed simultaneously and to be supported. This adds to the difficulties as many companies are attempting to synchronize both personnel and processes across multiple life cycle stages. So it seems that, as we add bits and pieces to the various elements that we're already supporting in IT, things become increasingly complicated. Now, this slide is a very busy slide, but I wanted to include it because this slide and its counterpart later in the presentation, I think, are two of the most important slides that we might see as part of the results of this survey. So this slide cross-tabs the results of 2 questions to quantify the revenue-related value proposition of high-functioning DevOps teams. So one question assessed the quality of the daily interactions between dev and ops at the surveyed company. The second quantified the organization's percentage increase or decrease in year-over-year revenue for the prior year. And this slide shows the findings of both questions in context to one another. Now, I could probably spend our entire half hour discussing just this slide, but one quick takeaway is a comparison of the blue bars. These represent the companies with year-over-year revenue increases of 10% or more. So just a simple comparison shows you that companies rated as having average or above average or excellent DevOps collaboration were 11.5 times more likely to experience double-digit year-over-year revenue growth than those whose DevOps interactions were only average or poor. Now, another interesting thing about this is that for those of you who were following the 2014 findings on the same topic, it came up with similar overwhelming differences. So the key takeaway here from my perspective is that DevOps-related collaboration pays off big in terms of not just IT efficiency, but also in terms of the company's bottom line. Applications have become so important to companies as they try to roll out new services and become more flexible. Now let's take a few minutes to look at the findings related to continuous delivery. So you may remember the prior slide that showed more than 95% of respondents being engaged in DevOps initiatives. Since more than 90% are also engaged in continuous delivery, we view this as confirmation of the idea that the two are probably frequently practiced together, kind of in context with one another. In terms of the drivers for continuous delivery, an important factor to note is that the top four are all either business or customer related. Conversely, notice that the bottom two, which are regulatory and industry specific in nature, come in last. Now, if I would have had to guess prior to last year, I would have probably turned these results on its head. I would have, thought that mandated changes would be a top driver, although that does not appear to be the case. So drawing parallels between agile development practices and continuous delivery, only 5% say that the two are unrelated. Almost 40%, and these numbers are just taken from those survey respondents who were actually practicing agile software practices. Of these, almost 40% feel that agile and continuous delivery should remain in sync across the life cycle. It's also interesting to note that 30% view continuous delivery as their chief bottleneck, and that only 16% view their continuous delivery pipeline as being fast and efficient. So the point here is, that people view continuous delivery as being important, although a large percentage of companies, actually almost 50%, don't feel that their continuous delivery processes are as fast as they might like them to be. So what does the word continuous mean when we're talking about continuous delivery? Well, in almost 65% of companies, code is being delivered at least weekly, and almost 20% of the respondents to this survey are delivering daily or more often. I actually talked with a company last week who had delivered thousands of code changes, small changes, the prior week. Clearly, many companies have become adept at accelerating the delivery of new features to the business, and those who have massively accelerated delivery to this degree have almost invariably done so by automating many of the processes involved in continuous delivery with release automation and high-quality software testing types of products. At the same time, the rate of change to production ecosystems has also massively accelerated, and those of us in IT know what that can mean to production systems, so that's kind of one of the impacts here. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. From the business perspective, if we look at the payoffs and kind of the benefits and the detriments, from the business perspective, accelerated delivery frequency definitely has benefits. Respondents cite higher levels of customer satisfaction and faster revenue growth, so they're actually aware of the revenue implications as well. Now, this slide's going to look familiar. It really is kind of the same format as the previous one that I showed you, and it's kind of equally busy. But on this one also, the blue bars represent companies whose revenue increased by 10% or more. So the first question on this one asked how delivery frequency had changed over the prior 12 months. And then the second one was related to revenue growth, same as we saw on the previous slide. As you can see, companies whose delivery frequency increased in the double digits, basically by 10% or more in the prior year, were 2.5 times more likely to experience double-digit revenue growth, as indicated again by the blue bars. It's also notable that this reinforces the findings of my 2014 study, which also revealed a strong correlation between the two. Seeing this correlation 2 years in a row drives home its validity, and I believe the relationships I have shown between DevOps, continuous delivery, and revenue growth are some of the most important takeaways of this study. The bottom line here is that streamlining code delivery with release automation, automated testing, or other continuous delivery-related tool sets really is not just an investment in IT efficiency. It's an investment in the future of the business. So when we talk about acceleration, how much is delivery actually being accelerated? Well, as you can see here, almost half the participants in this study had double-digit frequency increases, and almost 10% increased frequency by at least 50%. Now, I did separate analyses of kind of the very fast movers based on revenue, and it really wasn't that different from what I showed you on the prior slide. So essentially where the difference seems to come in is acceleration of 10% or more is what seems to have the biggest impact on revenue. Frequency remained essentially the same for about 25% of the organizations surveyed, and what this indicates to me is that continuous delivery might be aspirational versus reality for a significant number of companies. So they're still in the process of getting there. So I've talked a lot about the positive benefits of continuous delivery. However, it has its dark side as well. While continuous delivery is definitely good for the business, it's putting more stress on IT. You can see here that faster delivery is requiring both operations and development to spend more time on production support. This is definitely an argument for more predictable and consistent deployments enabled by release automation. It's also an argument for tools that promote integration and other software testing, for application performance management solutions that assist in problem identification, and for better change control. It's also interesting to note that these percentages are rising compared to 2014. The numbers for operations, for example, have risen from 31% last year to 52% this year who tell us that operations is spending more time on production troubleshooting. So we'll see on the next slide that is taking its toll actually on both operations and development. On the top chart here, you can see that development is spending as much time doing day-to-day production support as it is on delivering new applications. And the top 3 tasks, time-wise, for operations teams are all application-related. So if you're a CIO wondering what your dev and ops teams do all day, here's the answer. They're supporting applications. And from my perspective, unless you want your developers supporting production all day, this is another argument for tools supporting automation of both the collaborative DevOps approaches and the continuous delivery of application code. So this brings us to a discussion of tools, and the tools is the respondents feel are most important in these activities. This slide drives home the fact that continuous delivery is not simply about delivering software faster. It's equally about delivering software that actually works and that doesn't adversely impact production. When we look at bottlenecks to continuous delivery, production troubleshooting is cited as the top issue. That's because operations and development teams who are spending time fixing production problems aren't spending time on developing and delivering new software. From this perspective, this is the number one factor slowing down the continuous delivery pipeline and indicates errors in deployment and or lack of testing. So this is very significant. IT organizations have always recognized that production changes are unsafe at any speed, and accelerating change simply adds to the risk. Automation across the pipeline reduces adverse impact by making deployments more well-tested and more predictable. Application management tool sets, which we've kind of uncovered as being important in multiple slides during this event, help to quickly resolve any production fallout by pinpointing performance or availability issues that could result from constant change. So while continuous delivery can be beneficial to the business, it definitely takes a toll on IT. And this is one key area where automation can help. In terms of Wishlist Tools for 2016, which this slide shows, release automation and application management tools are the top two choices, and quite interesting. Deployment and release automation tools enable companies to develop and enforce a standardized cookie-cutter approach to software delivery. As one of the participants in a recent discussion that I attended stated, after deploying thousands of automated releases in a relatively short time frame, our results are far more predictable than they were when we were deploying manually. APM tools as the number two choice mitigate the risks of production impact, particularly when used both pre- and post-production to identify and isolate application-related issues. The number three choice, workflow automation supporting DevOps and continuous delivery, is a recurring theme. Such automation can help govern processes, can also help span silos, and eliminate the repetitive manual tasks that tend to introduce so many errors into production. So to wrap up, I've actually gone a little bit over time, but hopefully I won't keep you that much longer. Agile, DevOps, and continuous delivery have all emerged as practices promoting faster delivery of high-quality software. EMA sees continuous delivery as being facilitated by strong DevOps practices, which means that some companies are still catching up in terms of putting the pieces in place that are necessary to support the kind of cross-functional activities that support continuous delivery. That being said, the role of tools can't be overstated. While standard tool sets are still important, new requirements imposed by cross-functional practices and accelerated software delivery make deployment and release automation and application management solutions numbers 1 and 2 on IT wish lists for 2016. Finally, with this research, we've once again confirmed the impact that both DevOps and accelerated software delivery can have on revenue growth. So investments in tools supporting either of or both of these are, from my perspective, investments in business growth as well. So, Raleigh, that wraps up my presentation today. I don't know if we have time for Q&A or not. I'm going to leave it up to you.
Great. Thank you, Julie. I think we will go ahead and wrap up, given that we were shooting for just about a half hour. Hopefully everyone enjoyed today's presentation. As I mentioned at the start, you will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA tomorrow that will include the on-demand playback as well as some additional resources. Also, as Julie mentioned, her report on this topic will be coming out in the next several weeks, and I will send you an email to notify you when it's available. Thanks again to our research sponsors, and thank you so much, audience, for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.